Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson about Reconstruction. This is part one of two video lessons. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. So for this PowerPoint, this is what we're focusing on. We're going to focus on the central questions of Reconstruction. We're talking about restructuring all of American society, primarily the South, but we're talking about restructuring American society after a massive, very intense civil war, right? So there are some key questions that we need to examine, that we need to look at. Whoops. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson about Reconstruction. This is part one of two video lessons, and I'm Miss Jennifer Blank. I will be your guide on this journey. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about, right? So there's some central questions. I mean, after a civil war, you need to fundamentally restructure the society to bring the sides back together, right? You're trying to mend the fences. You're trying to bridge the gap, right? So there are some central questions about how American society is going to be set up that we have to answer. So we're going to look at those first. Then we're going to look at a comparison of the presidential Reconstruction plans, that of Abraham Lincoln and that of his vice president, who would become president after his assassination, Andrew Johnson. Then we're going to look at Johnson's background. We're going to take a look at the black codes, and that will round out part one. All right, so central questions that we need to deal with Reconstruction. Number one, what system of labor is going to replace slavery? Because all of Southern society, the fundamental, foundational system was slavery, right? So you've got to figure out what you're going to do instead. Then what rights should freedmen receive other than emancipation? Should there be particular rights, certain benefits? What should happen to these newly freed slaves once they are free? What terms should the Confederate States be reunited with the Union, right? Should we mandate certain requirements before they can be let back in? Should we make it based on the state? Should we make it based on individuals? How is that going to work? What does that look like? And then how far should the federal government go to settle these issues? I'm sorry, I got cut off a little bit over there down here. How far should the federal government go to settle these concerns, right? How much should the federal government be doing? All right, so comparison of Reconstruction plans. All right, Lincoln was all about middle ground and compromise. Lincoln wanted to bridge that gap. He wanted to forgive the South. He wanted everyone to reconcile, and he wanted us to move forward, right? He wanted to heal the nation, all right? The South should not be punished. That was a prime directive of his. Do not punish the South. That's not going to get us anywhere, all right? He issued a proclamation of amnesty and Reconstruction, all right? And this 10% plan was like the key attribute of his Reconstruction initiative. He said that states could return to the Union without a problem because individuals violated the Constitution, not the states themselves. All right, so it was the individuals that did it, so the states could return without an issue. He wanted to streamline this process, okay? And then he also vetoed this bill called the Wade-Davis bill. Asked me about that in class. All right, now Johnson. Johnson, by stark contrast, not what Lincoln had in mind. And of course, with Lincoln being assassinated, Lincoln's Reconstruction plan was never enacted. So the whole middle ground compromise thing, nix, that didn't happen. It did not occur. So let's look at Johnson. All right, he appointed provisional governors to maintain control of the South. States all had to hold new constitutional conventions to deal with the issue of slavery built into their constitutions. Only loyal whites could vote, and of course it was incredibly entertaining trying to determine who was loyal or not. He required an oath of allegiance to the Union. Confederate leaders were all excluded. And you had to apply for a presidential pardon to regain your political and property rights, which basically means you had to kiss his butt if you wanted your political and property rights returned to you. It wasn't just applying for a presidential pardon. You had to kiss his behind. And if Johnson didn't like precisely the way you kissed it, well, guess what? You're not getting back your political and property rights. Southern states did have to ratify the 14th Amendment, which officially bans, or I'm sorry, the 13th Amendment, that says 13, 1-3, which banned slavery. They had to repudiate the national debt. And they had to declare their ordinances of secession illegal. All right. So now let me move my little camera up here, my little picture here. All right. So let me give you a compromise, like side-by-side view here. So Lincoln wants middle ground. Johnson has no middle ground. He appointed provisional governors to force the hand of the leaders of Southern states. Lincoln said the South should not be punished. By contrast, Johnson, his goal was to punish, particularly the wealthy plantation owners. He hated those people. He was on the side of the white yeoman farmers. Now, make no mistake, Johnson was no friend to black people. He was no friend to slaves. His problem with slavery was that everyone didn't have it. That was his problem. He was not a fan of the wealthiest of the wealthy in the South, and so his goal was to punish those people because he believed that they were behind the whole enterprise. So this is what we just discussed with Lincoln and Johnson. You can pause it if you want to and write that stuff down, but if you already wrote it down in the other two slides, there's no need. I just want to give you a side-by-side comparison. All right, so let me move my little camera thing back down there. All right, well, I guess it's all right. We'll just pop that right there. That's fine. We'll pop it right there. So Lincoln's 10% plan said that once 10% of the population took the oath of allegiance, then the states could be readmitted to the Union. Okay, it was proposed during the war, so before the conclusion of the war. This is what was his idea for reconciliation. It was meant to weaken the Southern rebellion and play on Southern exhaustion and devastation from the war. So he was hoping that by seeing sort of a light at the end of the tunnel or a way out, that they would just kind of give up the ghost. It was never enacted. Republicans claimed it didn't go far enough, and by Republicans I mean the radical Republicans, because it didn't guarantee black male suffrage. So they rejected Lincoln's plan. You are going to see problems with the radical Republicans later on. They caused some issues, just a few. All right, so Johnson's background, something to note, he was a white Southerner, but he was loyal to the Union. He did not agree with secession, so he was loyal to the Union itself. He was against the planter class, as I said. He was a racist. Like I also said, he was pro-slavery for everyone, okay? So like his issue was that all white people couldn't have slaves because the white planter class was hogging all the wealth for themselves. He endorsed emancipation only to reduce the power of that wealthy plantation class, that 1/10 of 1%. It's the only reason he endorsed it. He wanted to really put the screws to those guys. And he had a worse relationship with Congress than Lincoln, which if you know the background of Lincoln's relationship with Congress, it was bad. It was bad. Like, you think Congress's relationship with the president is bad now? You have absolutely no idea. You have no idea. Oh my God, it was bad. Train wreck. But Johnson's was worse. All right, so sectionalist divides, again, because sectionalism never really leaves us, as I've said in class. Initially, the Republicans and Northerners were happy with Johnson because he was sticking it to the South, you know, and they thought that was great. Stick it to those Confederates. Stick it to them, you know. But this attitude totally changed when Johnson pardoned all the Confederate officials because they kissed his behind. He allowed the passage of the Black Codes because he was a racist. He denied blacks the right to vote because he was racist. And he vetoed 2 bills designed to extend the Freedmen's Bureau and to nullify the Black Codes. Freedmen's Bureau was a bureaucratic division within the government that was designed to help newly freed slaves adjust to free life and society. So, yeah, when he did all that stuff, the radical Republicans were like, what? They like freaked out. Okay, so response to Johnson and massive rebellion. So Congress refused to seat the entire Southern Congressional delegation. They just would not let them in the doors, like barred them from entering, right? They established a joint committee to reevaluate Reconstruction policy, and they wanted to set further additional conditions for states to be readmitted to the Union. Two-thirds majority passed the Civil Rights Bill, so that sounds kind of good, but that Civil Rights Bill is going to go bye-bye. Talk about that later. They did pass the 14th Amendment, which declares equal protection of the laws. The 14th Amendment is really, 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 really important. Not just for this period because it's a Reconstruction Amendment, but also because it bears a lot of significance for future Supreme Court cases. This amendment guaranteed citizenship to newly freed slaves. I'm going to move my little camera guy back down there because now we have room. There we go. Oh, hello. How are you? Okay. But in the 14th Amendment is also the Equal Protection of the Laws Clause that guarantees that all citizens have equal protection under all the laws, regardless of who you are, your race, your religion. So that's going to bear increasing significance as U.S. history marches forward. They also enacted these crazy radical Reconstruction policies, which people at the time believed were crazy and radical. I'll leave it to you to judge. So Black Codes. I'm going to move my camera guy again. All right, there we go. It was illegal for blacks to be unemployed, okay? But here's the kicker, because all black people had to be apprenticed somewhere, so you had to find somebody who was willing to kind of like train you. And of course, no white people were willing to train any free slaves in the South, so you couldn't get a job unless you had an apprenticeship, but no one would give you an apprenticeship. So, and then, since it was illegal for blacks to be unemployed, virtually all these people wound up in jail, right? There were poll taxes. So if you wanted to go to the polls and vote, you had to pay taxes, which were ridiculous. And they didn't charge it to the white people, only to the black people. It resulted in extended servitude, very similar to slavery, because they were basically, it turned into wage slavery, where the owners would, or former owners, now employers, would give them so little that they were pretty much stuck where they were. Community and private enterprises came together. They banded together to enact segregation. So there's segregation everywhere, you know, black water fountains, blacks only bathrooms, things of that nature. And there were massive limits on property ownership. So even if somehow you could scrape up enough money, you could get an apprenticeship and you could be employed, actually owning property, there were another set of hurdles you had to jump through in order to even do that. So the South was uniformly 100% committed to blocking any possible success of newly freed slaves. That ends part 1. I will see you in part 2. I hope you learned what you needed to, and I'll see you soon.